Perhaps when you were little, adults referred to you as a wild child. Well, we're taking that meaning to a whole new and very literal level. Ahead, we have 10 feral kids who were discovered surviving in tough conditions thanks to wild animals. Whether dogs, cats, or chimpanzees, these kids are real, and the animals who raise them are 100% wild. Now, to prove you're civilized and an evolved human, be sure to click those subscribe and notification buttons before we head out. Natasha Mikhailova. The case of Natasha Mikhailova doesn't involve jungle or forest animals per se. You see, this little girl was raised in Russia but treated more as a family pet. As the result, experts say the dogs and cats she grew up with had a massive impact on her early upbringing. Completely neglected by her parents, Natasha only did what anyone would do and started copying the animals around her. She lapped up food like a cat, drank water with her tongue like a dog, and walked around on all fours. When the authorities discovered her, they were shocked at the 5-year-old's behavior and appearance. First, she looked more like a 2-year-old. Then there was her behavior. Natasha scratched at the door and barked like the dog she had been raised with. When she was introduced to other people, she would even jump up on them like a dog, hiss at them, or try and play dog games like fetch. Unfortunately, as crazy as this little girl's story seems, authorities in Russia say this is all too common as rates of divorce and unemployment remain high. Bello. People can be incredibly mean and cruel. This was seen firsthand when a boy named Bello was abandoned by his parents in the Falgore forest in Nigeria. Just months old when he was left in the forest, the disabled boy's fate seemed doomed. Then, nature stepped in when a family of chimpanzees found Bello and adopted him. It is estimated that for over a year and a half, the chimps nursed and cared for their adopted human as if he was their own. When hunters happened by, we can only imagine what they first thought when they saw a human child living with chimpanzees. Authorities say that when Bello was first brought in from the forest, he walked like his primate family, even dragging his hands on the ground. When he clapped, he cupped his hands over his head, and he even leapt around just like his wild foster family. Several years after moving back in with humans, Bello still continued to act more chimp than human by leaping around the room at night and throwing things. Unfortunately, we'll never know if he could ever be re-domesticated, as he passed away in 2005. The Wolf Boys. You may have heard of researchers living out in the wild to study wolves, but what about actual kids being raised by this wild beast? It happens, and there are more than a few examples of wolves raising children in the wild. Take the case of Dina Sanichar, aka the Wolf Boy of Sikandra. When the 19th century hunters saw a wolf walking in the forest, they took notice. We bet their jaws dropped when close behind came a small boy running on all fours. The hunters killed the wolf and took the boy to an orphanage where he ate off the floor and tore his clothes from his body. In fact, Sanichar never learned to speak, even by the time he passed away 30 years later. Fast forward to the 1970s, and another Indian farmer spotted a boy crawling around in the forest and playing with a pack of wolves. The farmer fought off the wolves and captured the boy, known only as Shamdeo. Judging by his appearance, which included sharp teeth and claw-like nails, Shamdeo had been raised by the wolves. Like Sanichar, his eating habits remained very primal, although Shamdeo is said to have at least been able to communicate with other humans by the time of his passing in 1985. The Cambodian Jungle Woman. This story is a bit confusing as it involves a case of mistaken identity. In 1989, a little girl, some called Rosham, disappeared into the jungles. No one heard of or saw her again until 2007. Then, Rosham was found in the forest as she tried to steal food from a farmer. Unable to speak any language, crawling around like an animal, and clearly living a feral lifestyle, the discovery made headlines. While some people believed she was living with a secret tribe in the forest, her appearance and behavior suggested animals may have played a role in her survival. In 2010, the girl once again tore off her clothes and escaped back into the jungle. Just last year, authorities found the woman naked, caked in mud, and scavenging in the forest. Incredibly, the family everyone thought she belonged to had been wrong all along. Rosham's actual name is Tak, and she hadn't been missing since 1989, only since around 2006. Returned to Vietnam to be with her biological father, this story has a happy ending but still leaves us with some questions. After all, while Tak is said to suffer from some disabilities, her behavior is rather similar to other kids who were raised by wild animals. The Boy and the Cats. If you're a dog person, then you likely aren't too wild about cats. We don't blame you. After all, cats can be pretty finicky, judgmental, and even arrogant. Yes, we're talking about you, Patches. In all seriousness, when it comes to raising humans, you wouldn't think of house cats as ideal candidates. Maybe lions or tigers? Although they might just eat the human after a while. Nonetheless, in Argentina, there was one confirmed case of a little boy who was raised for a short period of time by a pack of feral cats. In Misiones, a person walking on the streets noticed a large pack of feral cats. The individual approached and noticed that the cats were lying around and on top of a child. An attempt to get closer only upset the cats, who hissed and spat in the direction of the intruder. Once authorities were called in to deal with the angry felines, the truth was discovered. The boy they had been protecting was just a year old. He had actually wandered off from his father, who told authorities the cats had done this before. Evidence suggested the cats had been bringing scraps of food to their guest and even helped to keep him clean and warm. Hopefully, they were all rewarded for their service with squeaky toys and catnip. All this talk about kids who ran away and were raised by wild animals has us thinking about a quiz. Do you know approximately how many kids are reported to have run away in the US every year? We'll give you the answer after showing you a few more kids raised by wild animals. Marina Chapman. This next story involving a child being raised by wild animals has divided opinion on whether it is, in fact, real or fake. When she was only around 4 years old, Marina Chapman was involved in a kidnapping gone wrong. Allegedly, for whatever reasons, her kidnappers must have changed their plans because they abandoned Chapman in the Colombian jungle. For most of us, that would spell the end, but not Chapman. You see, in the jungle she ran across a group of capuchin monkeys. The furry little horde eventually accepted the strange human girl into their group in a rather Disney-like way. For several years, Chapman lived in the forest eating berries and bananas dropped by the monkeys. She slept in trees, walked on all fours, and lost the ability to communicate with other humans. That made things interesting when hunters stumbled across her path. Now living in England, people are pretty split on whether they believe this incredible story. Medical experts seem to think she's telling the truth, yet many companies stayed away from publishing her story as they simply couldn't believe something so fantastical could actually ever happen. The Siberian Dog Boy. Andrei Tolstik endured a childhood none of us could likely ever imagine. When he was just months old, Andrei's parents abandoned him in Siberia. Several years later, social workers approached him wondering why he wasn't in school. Then they noticed that he had no relatives around. Who took care of this boy, and how did he survive? What officials didn't immediately know is that Andrei had been living on his own for years. Well, not entirely on his own. You see, a dog had come to Andrei's rescue and helped raise him until the age of 7. Having been raised by a dog, the boy knew only how to act like a 4-legged canine. He couldn't speak with anyone and initially walked on all fours. If he felt threatened by anyone, he bit them, and Andrei was sure to sniff his food carefully before eating it. Once reintegrated with society, the boy showed rather quick improvement compared to other feral kids. Andrei learned to walk on 2 feet, use a spoon when eating, and communicate with hand gestures. While authorities searched for his parents, Andrei continues to learn how to be a human. Raised by goats. Anyone who has ever been up in the mountains knows that they can be a dangerous place. From the treacherous landscape to the wild animals to the harsh conditions, unless you know what you're doing, we wouldn't suggest heading up there on your own. Then there's the story of a boy known only as Daniel. Allegedly abandoned by his family as a small child, Daniel is said to have lived and been raised by goats in the Andes Mountains of Peru. Discovered by other humans in 1990, Daniel survived by drinking goat's milk and eating the roots and berries which his 4-legged companions consumed. Over the 8 years that he lived with the goats, Daniel naturally began to copy their movements, and even walked on all fours. Unsurprisingly, he couldn't speak any language, but had developed the ability to communicate with his family of goats. We can only imagine the thoughts of the hikers who stumbled across the then 12-year-old Daniel as he raced around the rocky ledges with his pack of wild goats. Reportedly, a group of researchers from an American university were able to study the Andes goat boy, and they are the ones who decided to name him Daniel. The Mountain Boy. Place a bowl of soup in front of Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja today and he knows how to eat from it. However, back in the 60s when he was just a teenager, Marcos would plunge his hands into the bowl and burn himself. We guess when you're raised by animals, you don't learn how to eat like a human. Apparently, for most of his early life, Marcos lived by himself in the mountains of southern Spain. You see, he was sold by his father to a goat herder at a young age. When that man passed away, Marcos was on his own with no one around to help. He had learned how to trap small animals to eat, but he had to watch boars and wolves to learn what other foods could be consumed. Incredibly, one day he fell asleep after playing with a wolf cub. When he awoke, he was face to face with the mother wolf. Instead of attacking, she offered him food and accepted him into the pack. Marcos lived like this until he was 19. Caught and reintegrated into society, the wolf boy had to relearn everything from talking to using a fork and knife. While some people were pretty skeptical of his tale, witnesses in the area have been able to recount seeing him living up in the mountains. John Cebuña. When it comes to evolution, scientists are pretty clear that a big link exists between humans and monkeys. After all, their faces, hands, and feet all have fairly close similarities to our own. This link has often been used in everything from Disney classics like Tarzan to epic blockbusters such as King Kong. In fact, such films may not be far from the truth. You see, when John Cebuña was just a little boy, the situation in his home country of Uganda seemed unstable. Then, when his mother passed away, John decided it was time to get out and made a run for the jungle. How could a little boy possibly survive the dangers of the jungle? Well, Cebuña wasn't alone, and reportedly a group of vervet monkeys took a liking to him. Now, they didn't build a treehouse or even a monkey village in the jungle, but things did get pretty Disney-like. You see, for nearly 3 years, the monkeys protected Cebuña and showed him what to eat. Once discovered by other humans, the 7-year-old Cebuña was reintegrated back into society. It wasn't easy, though, as he had learned to speak and stop acting like the monkeys who had saved him. So, do you know approximately how many kids run away from home in the US every year? The answer is between 1.6 and 2.8 million. Most return a short while after being reported, but we are left wondering if any end up in the forests and mountains, living with the animals. Well, that's it for our looks at feral kids raised by animals, folks. We've got a lot more videos here at The Richest about strange and fascinating animals, so be sure to check them out. And just to prove that you yourself aren't a wild animal, maybe click that subscribe button before you head out for the day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.